Hello YouTube, happy Saturday. So we're doing a little mail day video slash kind of a commentary video talking a little bit more about Slabgate, which is something I kind of promised already in a previous video. Part of the reason why I'm also combining it with a couple of other things is because the mail day is kind of short. There were only really 3 packages this week, which is okay. Sometimes that happens. 3 came in, and you know, there's some other stuff that I'm waiting on, so that'll come in future weeks. But for this week, it's short and straightforward, and then we'll include a couple of other things that we're going to talk about, including the Slabgate thing. But as far as pickups concerned, first pickup I already revealed on the channel, and I did that in my player collecting video series, so episode 2. So I'll put the I in the description. Now, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm naturally left-handed, so I tend to point that way, like say this way. I think it's this way. Actually, no, wait. It should be that. I'll figure it out eventually. The whole camera and reversing thing like a mirror throws me off completely, and I always forget where the eye is. One of those directions is going to have the eye for that video, and if you want to check it out, you certainly can. Long story short, it was a box that came in from eBay where I got a collection of, or a player lot of 175 different, and I mentioned more about that in the video. It was actually 156 different with some duplicates. But anyway, a nice little lot of Carlos Delgado cards, which I added to that player collection. So now I have 215 different Carlos Delgado cards, and now officially my collection of Delgados is off and running. I already had some from before, but now that I've added that in, now we're well into the 200s. So we're going to kind of track our progress in these mail day videos as we go along. As far as the other player collection that I'm working on, no actual additions to the Vladimir Guerrero Jr. collection this week, although I did get a package in. So the second package I got was a Vladimir Guerrero Topps Chrome rookie card. So this is the regular one. I actually was winning 2 of these lots at the same time, and I already had the other one previously, so I've already got that one in the collection. So this is actually a duplicate of that one, but that's okay. Getting an extra Topps Chrome Vladdy Jr. rookie is not necessarily a bad thing. I'll hang on to that one. And it's a decent looking card, from what I can tell. I'll have to take a closer look at it and see how the centering is and the corners and all that good stuff. But it looks pretty good. If it's nice, I may include that as a possible candidate to get graded this fall. Now, like I said, I am going to talk more about grading in a couple of minutes. But before we get to that, my other pickup for the week was actually this one here. So this one is also actually not a new addition to the collection, but it is. It's a Mike Modano, a Leaf Ultimate Signatures subset card, so it's a certified autograph. Now, if you've watched any of my pickup videos in the last couple of months, this one is going to look kind of familiar because I picked up a bunch of those. There was a whole set of them, different parallel versions of it in different foil colors. So this is a silver version out of 2. So if you can see that there, I'm going to hopefully it'll, there you go, great. So that's card number 2 of 2. Now the reason why it should look familiar to you, if you've seen some of my recent pickup videos, is that it should look a lot like this one. So that's actually number 1 of 2. So I actually have both. Now this isn't something I would normally do for the collection. I really don't. This qualifies as gratuitous. Having both number 1 of 2 and 2 of 2, completely unnecessary. But I ended up running into it. I have a saved search for trying to get these because I've got almost all of them. The only 2 that I can think of that are missing is there's supposed to be a blue parallel out of 5, which I haven't seen one. I know the blue parallel exists because some of the other subsets where I've got Modano cards in them, I have the out of 5 card, but I haven't seen it anywhere on eBay. And the other one that I'm looking for is there's supposedly a green parallel that is a 1 of 1. There's also a gold 1 of 1, which I do have. So I basically have everything. And now, technically speaking, this is sort of a 1 of 1. I have got both copies of this particular version, the silver version. It was just an opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So it's like having another 1 of 1. So I don't know if I'll be able to get my hands on it. The out of 5 I think should be attainable, but I just haven't seen it. So maybe I will at some point, hopefully. Now, for the rest of the video, so as I said, as far as mail day is concerned, that's really it. It was just 3 packages in total. Got an extra Vladdy Topps Chrome rookie card, and then I've completed a little mini set of these Leaf Ultimate signature cards. So now I've got both versions of the silver, and that can be added to the collection. So while I talk a little bit about Slabgate, card grading, and then the ComC Marketplace, which I have utilized in the past, and I still think highly of, to be honest with you, and I'll explain why. So while I'm talking about that, I'm also going to kind of combine it with something. So I'm going to open up a box, a little blaster box of this 2017 Donruss Panini football. And especially since we're getting close to football season, the opener is this Thursday, and rather appropriately, we've got the Packers and the Bears. So there you go. You got Trubisky and Rodgers. So I picked this up from an Amazon seller, so I thought I'd pop it open here while we're talking. So, the reason why I decided to talk about the whole Slabgate thing again, not a topic I'm super interested in, but it is newsworthy. But the biggest reason I'm going to talk about it is because there was a post on the Blowout Cards forum this week, and I'm going to put a link in the description for it if you want to check it out. It is lengthy. I think it's almost 600 posts at this point, so it is long. If you've got nothing better to do in a long time to do it, you can certainly read through the whole thing. What I'd probably recommend is checking out the first post, because it kind of explains and gives you the gist of it. The rest of it is just a long, drawn-out conversation, we'll call it. There's a lot going on with that. But long story short, a couple of members of the group that have appointed themselves a Blowout Detective Agency, or BODA, which, not to be mean about this, and it's going to come off as mean, but Blowout Detective Agency? It's kind of lame. Anyway, so I don't know if I mentioned it, there are 8 cards per pack and 11 packs in the blaster box here, so that's what we got. And I think you got Patrick Mahomes rookie in this year, so 2017, Mitchell Trubisky rookie, Deshaun Watson, and a few others that I can't remember off the top of my head. But those would be the main ones, I guess. So we'll see if we get anything good. So, anyway, as I said, long story short, the post was exposing some cards that have been previously purchased in other places, like PWCC, which has had its own controversies recently. Basically, sellers that are buying cards in different forums that might be already graded or might not be graded, or might be buying them raw, and basically trimming them or altering them in different ways, and then getting them sent in to PSA or even BGS and getting them put into holders. So the concern really is twofold. Number one, trimming and all that has always been part of the hobby. Altering cards, that's part and parcel of what happens. But where I would say that the concern really came in is that if altered cards are not only getting in there, but also being graded by the card companies, that creates a problem. The marketplace itself, not really doing a very good job policing, that's a problem. I've got a couple of issues with some of the conclusions that some of the posters have drawn, but it's a forum, so there's always going to be an aspect of that. One overarching point that I'll make, actually, let me do a quick disclaimer and then I'll make my point. So disclaimer number one, I'm not going to downplay in any way, shape, or form the concerns that the legitimate concerns that people have about it, because anything that undermines the credibility of, say, a PSA, where you lose confidence in if it's been graded and certified by this group, if altered cards get into these graded holders, and they have, and they will continue to be, if I'm being completely honest with you, I think, it brings a concern, because then it leads people to go, well, then which cards can I actually trust? Because the whole point of the third-party grading, in addition to the increased values which came about as a result of heightened trust, is the trust factor. Like a lot of things, if you lose trust, then suddenly there's no premium. There's no reason to have a premium, because suddenly it's just a fancy holder, an ultrasonically sealed holder, and it's not really doing the purpose that is to certify that this card is legit. Now, I will quibble with the definition of legit in this instance, but we'll get to that in a minute. The point is that anything that undermines that or undermines the marketplace itself is a concern, and that would affect the hobby, quote unquote. The problem I think that came about as a result of a lot of those posts, and kind of my issue with it, is that I think some of the folks in Blowout consider Blowout to be the hobby, when it's really a subset of the hobby. The truth is, even a forum that has 50, 60,000 people registered in it, which it does, is still a small subset of the hobby. It doesn't feel like it should be a small subset, but it is. The hobby's a lot bigger than that. And also, Sports Card YouTube. A lot of these channels that you're watching, if you're watching this video, technically I'm part of Sports Card YouTube. I'm participating in it. And some of the biggest channels in this genre inside of YouTube are actually really small potatoes in the grand scheme of different genres of YouTube. I think you take a Packer Cards 87, who's one of the bigger channels I would consider inside of Sports Card YouTube. I think he just cleared 40,000 subscribers, which is a massive amount of people in a conventional sense. But when you consider that, the most subscribed YouTuber, PewDiePie, is either approach or past 100 million subscribers, we're talking on a completely different scale. Some of these video game channels are on a completely different level. So even a 40,000, that's a lot. But in Sports Card YouTube, the biggest of the big are still relatively small potatoes compared to a lot of other ones. Because you don't get one of those little plaques from YouTube until you get to 100,000 subscribers. And this YouTuber who's, Packer Cards 87, who's a very big channel in this genre, is not even halfway there. So think about that for perspective. Getting back to the big point, so first pack I pulled a Nathan Peterman rated rookie. like I said, I'm opening the packs as I'm talking, so trying to multitask a little bit and keep my thoughts straight as I'm trying to open packs. So this Blowout Cards Forum exposed a bunch of cards that they were able to reasonably determine. Some of the cards were serial numbered, so they were able to match them up pretty well. The point is the work that they were doing was very, very impressive, fairly thorough. That's why I say check out at least the first post, because it kind of explains the general concept behind the thread, and then also shows you how detailed they were able to get in terms of finding some of the cards in relatively obscure ways. But a lot of the cards definitely showed signs of trimming. And specifically, they demonstrated that the card had been bought previously in other places. So like say a PWCC card had been bought, and then somebody had cracked it out of the holder, done a trim job on it, and then got it into another PSA holder, which is a problem. So the problem really comes down to two parts. Number one, your confidence in the third-party grader, like a PSA, who is grading trimmed cards. And then secondly, your confidence in marketplaces, so like an eBay or like a ComC. And the issue that I have with a lot of the conclusions that people were drawing is so they were jumping to big conclusions. And it resembled a lot like the issue that came in the financial crisis in 2008. And I'm using this it's not an obscure reference really, but I'll explain why I'm mentioning it. The issue with the financial crisis was that you had these bad financial instruments that were created. And they were overly complicated, and not a lot of people understood them. And the end result was a lot of these big financial institutions were investing in them, trying to make money, but they basically put themselves in a position where they undermined confidence in their own investment inventories. That's really what it came down to. People will look at it and go, I'm investing in you, but you've got these investments that are no good. The problem is, I don't know how much you're being affected by it. Do you only have these bad investments? Or is it like 1% of your holdings, 5% of your holdings, 10% of your holdings? And because you have these things in your holdings, it brings your entire holdings into question. This should sound familiar to you, because basically what I'm describing to you in this thread is saying there are sellers out there who specifically go out of their way to buy cards that may already be graded or may be raw or whatever the case is, and they're altering them to increase their condition and getting them graded by PSA or BGS or whatever. And by getting them graded, they're increasing their value and selling them to people. The problem that creates is, even if you say, okay, this seller has some cards that we've been able to confirm are trimmed and altered, does that mean that all their cards are trimmed and altered? Does it mean some of their cards are trimmed and altered? And more importantly, this is where, again, this goes into that financial crisis example that I just used. Even someone who isn't intending to participate in this, if another dealer buys cards from this bad actor's inventory, they suddenly have an altered card. So if you find out that they have an altered card, now this other dealer has been kind of thrown into this thing, because now all of a sudden you're doubting this dealer's rest of their inventory, which may be perfectly legitimate and fine. And that's the problem. Even though, relatively speaking, the altered cards make up a fairly small majority, it casts doubt on a whole bunch of other things. So high-grade vintage cards suddenly are cast doubt upon them. Even modern cards that potentially have some value, if they're in higher grades, it casts doubt on them. I think the rest of it became really dramatic from there, because like I said, hundreds of posts. Upwards of almost 600 posts. By the way, the second pack has a Curtis Samuel rookie threads. So I don't know if you can make that out. Nothing too crazy. So, Nathan Peterman and Curtis Samuel. Exciting. With all that said, the issue that this creates, as I mentioned, is just doubt. And that was what in the financial crisis they called contagion. So this is the hobby version of contagion. Because it's not enough that you have bad actors in the hobby doing these things. It's that what is the impact on other dealers and other collectors? Because the same way, a collector can buy this card thinking it's perfectly fine. But at the same time, if they go and resell the card later on, they can get cast with the same brush, because it's like, oh, well, you're selling an altered card. And it's like, well, they didn't know that when they bought it. So it creates a problem. Nice. Brett Favre Gridiron Kings. That's a nice one from my little Packers collection. It's kind of sweet. And I got one of the rookies here. So this is one of the rookies. Not quite as exciting as Nathan Peterman, but we've got Mitchell Trubisky. So that's one half of the Thursday Nighter this week. There. See, the camera doesn't even want to focus on Mitchell Trubisky. That's how excited it was. Like I said, from the collector standpoint, what it really does is it makes a lot of collectors doubt. It brings a concern for them, because if they bought from some of these dealers who are getting caught red-handed having altered these cards, it makes the collectors have to go back and look and go, if I bought 10 cards from them, are all 10 cards bad, or half of them bad? And that's really the problem it creates for a lot of these, for a lot of folks who otherwise are kind of innocent bystanders in the issue. The other problem it creates is that, like as I said, it also brings into doubt the market. So COMC is one of the ones that's getting dragged into it because they are a marketplace where where some of these cards have been making it into. And really, that's not entirely their doing, because realistically, any marketplace that has a place for people to sell cards is capable of having the same thing. It could just as easily have been on eBay, and there are these cards that are being sold on eBay. So it's not like one marketplace is more guilty or worse than another. Although I feel that there was an unrealistic expectation that, hey, we found evidence of these sellers having these bad cards, so, take all their stuff down, or, ban the seller. And I'm like, okay, if you're COMC, and I'm looking at it from their perspective, because you should consider a couple of perspectives when you're thinking about this. Okay, so you discover that. Even if you take the evidence at face value, because remember, this evidence is being given to you anonymously. You're saying like, hey, look at this. Well, looking at it is one thing. So even if you decide, okay, it seems like this is right, there's definitely an issue here, how many cards does it take before you decide to take some kind of action? When do you really start thinking about it? Because say a seller has 50,000 cards on your platform, and we're able to definitively say that 5 or 10 or 100, let's pick a big number, 100 of them are 100%, we are confident that these cards have been altered. So 100 out of 5,000. That's not a very high percentage. And if the rest of the cards are legit, are you going to pull all of them? That's a tough decision to make. Because if you're COMC, you not only have to make sure you make a decision like that people can live with and people can understand. For your other sellers, you have to make sure that you have some kind of a policy in place, some mechanism, where if you're a seller who buys from one of these bad actors, that you're not going to get your account entirely suspended and pulled and all your cards pulled off because we find one bad card out of your thing that you bought from somebody else in the first place. The problem is you don't know, because you can't establish the provenance easily. You then have to start assuming that everybody's stuff is bad. And the overarching concern that brings for some folks is that, oh, well, how will that affect the hobby? Well, it could affect it for sure. It could be a major issue. I honestly don't think it's going to have that big an impact at all. It's a subject we're talking about. We're talking about it on Sports Card YouTube for sure. But the reason why we're talking about it is because we're really into the hobby. We're really tuned into it. But we're also not the people that are just buying a couple of packs here and there, but who buy some boxes and crack them open. Or people who don't send anything in for grading and don't really care one way or the other. If I pull it from a pack, like this Mitchell Trubisky, I could put this up and say, hey, I got this Mitchell Trubisky. It's like, oh, well, is that card trimmed or whatever? Based on the current thing. I just pulled it from a pack just now. I literally pulled it out of one of these. So if it is, then it came from the factory that way. I can't do anything about it. And the other issue is, as far as trimming is concerned, there are manufacturer tolerances for some issues, especially older cards, vintage especially. It's hard to tell. You can pull out a ruler all the time and try to figure it out that way, but there is always going to be a little bit. When you've got that much doubt, there's always going to be doubt, and that's an issue. So I pulled a Le'Veon Bell Ground Force in the pack as well. I like some of the inserts in some of these Donruss issues. And then I did get a rated rookie of Brad Kaya. I don't know anything about that guy. Got me for trade lines. The thing with COMC, as I said, is that I don't think they have established a policy of it. So you could consider that maybe it's under the terms of service if you're a seller. So maybe they could grab somebody based on that and then pull the account. But if you do that, you have to be careful, because the terms of service have to be clear enough to define some kind of policy where somebody anonymous saying that your cards are bad, even if you're able to provide decent evidence, which in this case they've got, so the evidence that was given was reasonable. If you're able to provide decent evidence, what is the threshold? If you find a bad card in a seller's grouping, is that enough? Because if the seller says, well, I bought that card from another seller or from eBay or from whatever, and it was already graded and I don't know, COMC is going to have a bit of a tough time, because number one, they have to try to establish that provenance. Number two, in order to apply this correctly, you have to make sure you don't cast with too broad a brush. And number three, you've got the last problem, which I'll talk about in a second. PSA certified it, and you were kind of using PSA as a crutch to be able to avoid having to examine card by card, because COMC as a marketplace isn't really the ones who should be trying to look at these cards to figure out if they're legit or not, especially if they're already in a certified holder. That's a really tough thing to ask them to do, and I don't expect that. As a buyer, I don't expect COMC to do that. Some people try to use some of their marketing slogan tagline saying the safe marketplace. They say safe marketplace. It's like, well, safe marketplace means I buy a card, you know, I see this card on COMC, for example. Just use an example from one of these packs. So I see this card, and I buy this card for 50 cents. And I get this card in the and I trigger the mail mechanism saying mail it to me. I get this card in the mail. That is a successful transaction. That is what COMC is designed to do. If I don't get the card, then we've got a problem. But the whole point is that since COMC is the one sending it to me, I should get it from them. Well, that means they've done their end of the transaction. They're providing a marketplace, and that is how that's done. The problem is that I think the expectations have gotten out of whack. Some people are thinking that somehow they're supposed to be the watchers of everything, when really it is just a marketplace. And they were, like everybody else, relying on PSA. Now, talking about PSA themselves, a lot of people expressed a lot of shock and concern about, you know, PSA's role in this. Real quick, I'll tell you the next couple of cards on here. Joshua Dobbs, the rookies, is a neat card. So getting a lot of Steelers. These inserts are Steelers here. And then Leonard Fournette, rated rookie. But talking about PSA's role in this, what you really got is a situation where PSA themselves have set themselves up as this arbiter where they are the ones doing the certifications. But the problem it creates is that if you know your history, and I've referenced this before in another video, I'm not gonna pull that up in the eye for you as well, but I will tell you I've referenced it. The very first card that PSA ever graded was the T206 Honus Wagner, the famous one, the Gretzky Honus Wagner, the PSA 8 one. And years ago, and I made reference to it in that video, but I didn't have the specifics off the top of my head at that point, but I have seen it recently. Bill Mastro, who was involved in that, basically pled guilty and basically told in court, admitted to having altered the card, trimming the T206 Honus Wagner so that the edges and corners would be better. So that was the very first card ever certified by PSA, and it was a trimmed card. So at that point, again, I'm not surprised. So maybe the problem is that I come at it from the perspective of not being cynical. I think cynical is the wrong word, but I'm not naive. I understood the history of PSA years ago. PSA does a certain job as far as I'm concerned, and they do that job reasonably well. I think the vast majority of PSA graded cards are fine. I think they're legit. I've sent plenty of cards into PSA myself, and I've gotten grades that I felt were mostly correct. And the problem is when you try to get like this lazy catch-all solution and say, well, if, you know, one of these cards are bad, or 5 of these cards are bad, or 100 of these cards are bad, then they're all bad. Well, that doesn't work. Real quick, I'll make a point about that. But next pack. So I've got Deshaun Watson and Mitchell Trubisky. Hoping maybe in the last couple of packs I can get the Mahomes. That'd be kind of fun. But I did take down a couple of notes so that I'm not completely drawing a blank. I added up the baseball, basketball, football, and hockey. So I stuck the 4 major sports. And I used the PSA population report, which, by the way, is wrong because people crack out cards and do all that. But I use it as an estimate to help us out a little bit here. Realistically, there are, according to the population report, with those 4 major sports, 22,668,000 cards have been graded. So I don't know if you can make that out there. There you go. So 22 million. Let's round it down and make it 20 million. Let's make the math easy. 20 million cards of PSA is graded. Even if 5% of them were bad, that's a lot of cards. 5% being bad, that's upwards of a million cards. I think over. So if I told you 5% are bad, and I said to you then, 1 million cards are bad. They're altered, they're trimmed, they're recolored. They're all kinds of alterations that have existed in the hobby for a long time, before PSA even existed. All these types of alterations already existed. So if I told you that, now you freak out. You lose your mind. But at the same time, I go back to referring to the very first PSA graded card ever being an altered card, being a trimmed card. When that's the first card, I'm not saying what are you expecting. I sort of am, but what I'm really trying to get at is I don't understand what your expectation is. If you're hoping for perfection, you're not going to get it. Another third-party grader can take a stab at it, but you're not going to get perfection. The problem that you have is not solvable in the way that you would like, because I referenced it already. And press proof of Leonard Floyd. But the honest answer is, as long as there's a financial incentive to cheat the system, people are going to cheat the system. And cheating the system can take on different forms. It can mean trimming cards, altering cards, doing all that. And it will mean trying your best to get it by the PSAs and the BGSs of the world, because you know that the market has said if a card is a PSA 10, it is worth sometimes multiples of what a PSA 9 is. If you didn't have the grade on there and you didn't care, and you bought the card and not the holder, then all of a sudden it would take away a lot of the inducement, and it would probably reduce. It wouldn't eliminate, but it would reduce the need or the effort to try to do it. Because at that point, if it's not going to make you money, you're probably not going to expend the effort to try to do it. As long as there's money to be made, there will always be people who would cheat or game the system. There will always be people who will try to take advantage. There will always be people who will do whatever they need to do to make a buck. That in and of itself doesn't throw the whole hobby under the bus. What it does, though, is it means that people need to be a little more realistic and need to understand that they do need to try to take care of themselves to the best of their ability. And that means buy the card and not the holder, and it also means buy the seller. The credibility of the seller is really a big thing. But it also means, honestly, stop trying to catch everyone. You want to be diligent. You want to be vigilant. But you're not going to be... Finding that a seller has an altered card in and of itself does not assign guilt on the entire rest of their inventory. Because if you're going to do that, then you may as well just leave the hobby entirely. Because realistically, there's always going to be an air of suspicion. Now you have been, this is the hobby's original sin, and for some reason people are just catching on to this now. You know now that it's out there, if you didn't already. For some people, this has been an enlightening experience. For some of us who have been around a little while, this is like, okay, yeah, what else is new? It's just a different version. It's another chapter of the same story. If you're going to get that upset about it now, I do understand. I get it. But at the same time, I do feel that to a certain degree, you've been kind of naive. But now that you've had the bite of the apple, so to speak, now what are you going to do about it? That would be kind of my question to you. If I could offer a suggestion, it would be this. Collect what you enjoy. Understand, use this as an opportunity to learn something. What you need to learn is that you do need to be vigilant. You do need to keep your eyes open. You need to not just be trusting for trusting's sake, but at the same time, don't get jaded about the hobby. That's my suggestion. You shouldn't get jaded. Like I said, I may come off as cynical, but I'm not. I still enjoy collecting. I still have fun cracking open packs of cards. And I got my nice little stack of cards here. I got 2 out of the 3 rookies I'm looking for. No Mahomes, but I did get Trubisky, and I did get Deshaun Watson, and I got a couple of other players in here. Press proof, memorabilia card. I got some cool stuff. I got one more of these blasters. I'll open it up in a different video. Maybe I'll do it for the Sunday randoms. But the point is, I still have fun with the hobby and the little joys that it gives. If I could give you anything to take away from it, because this has been kind of a long rambling video, and I'm going to try to cut it to make it a little bit more coherent, hopefully. What I really want to get across is that there are little joys in the hobby. Enjoy them. Have fun. If you're going to spend all your time, and God bless the folks that in the blowout cards thing, that I guess their fun now is in trying to track every single fraud and every single questionable thing in the hobby. You're going to have a full plate, because you're going to find a lot. But if that's what makes you happy, then who am I to deny you? With that said, though, it doesn't really seem fun to me to dwell on that all the time. And as far as PSA is concerned, they still have a place in the hobby, I think. The argument that they are corrupt and that they have certain issues has always been true. It's always been there. I could see the argument being that they need to clean up their method. The problem that I have really is this. In order to accomplish what you want PSA to be, I don't think it's actually possible. The reason why I say so is this. In order to grade millions of cards, you're going to need a ton of personnel. You're going to need to train the personnel. That part is all true. It needed to be there. It needs to be there. That all has to happen. It has to be there. The problem is, in order to do so, without jacking up the prices to an exorbitant rate is almost impossible. On the one hand, if you did jack up the prices to an exorbitant rate, the advantage would be that it would reduce the necessity or the value, I suppose, in sending in certain cards, which might actually work to your favor. Maybe the best example I can give you right now, in a pinch, just in front of me, would be something like this, the Deshaun Watson card. Let's say Deshaun Watson plays really well this year. His rookie cards will go up in value. This card would go up in value, which would be awesome. I'd appreciate that since I pulled one. This one is not exactly super great centering. It's not bad. It's probably a PSA 9, if I was going to guess. It looks like one. But let's say it was a 10. Let's say it was beautifully centered, pristine, really good. It would go up in value no matter what. But given that there is a premium on a PSA 10, it would suddenly go up a lot more. But since this is a Donruss set, it is more of a base brand, like a lower tier brand. If it cost $10 a card to grade. So for me, when I go to the card show where I am every 6 months, it's going to cost me $8 if I wanted to get that card graded. Probably that Deshaun Watson, I wouldn't bother with it, but the point is at $8, I could think about it. If the Trubisky is in good condition, I could probably think about that one too. If I got a Mahomes, I could think about it. There's enough value in it for me for $8 to go for it. If the exact same grading experience required, if I had to pay $50 a card for it, I wouldn't send in that Watson, even if I was really confident in the centering of it, because it would have to be worth a lot more. The risk wouldn't be worth the attempt at $50 a pop. I would focus in on probably a higher value card. If I sent in a Deshaun Watson, I'd send it in from one of the more premium brands. All of a sudden, these cards in this stack would suddenly be no longer worthwhile for me, given that it is a lower tier brand. Which means that people that send in 50 cards, 100 cards, 500 cards, they suddenly probably wouldn't send in 50, 500, or 100 or 500 cards. They would probably be a lot more selective. All of a sudden, the amount of cards being submitted would shrink by a factor of 10, probably. Something along those lines. If you imagine that, the same graders then could suddenly have a little bit more time to look at each card. And if that happened, you'd probably catch a lot more of these things, because you can argue about dealers getting preferential treatment, and that's a completely different discussion, which is worth having another day. But even if you think that's true, the majority of us don't get preferential treatment, but the majority of us are getting the exact same 30-second review on a lot of these cards. They're getting 30 seconds to look at that card. And they're probably not sitting there with a ruler trying to really measure it out to try to catch, unless it's obvious. And I've got some more thoughts about trim cards, and maybe for the Sunday Randoms video, I'll talk a little bit more about the role of what do altered cards really mean, and what is their place in the hobby, and that I can leave for a different discussion. My conclusion here is what I said. Try to enjoy the hobby as best you can. I don't see any reason of losing any sleep over this. If you're really that worried about it, then sell off your cards and get out of it. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm not saying that to try to get you to leave. But I'm being honest with you. If it's going to make you unhappy, then you probably shouldn't stick around, because it's not going to change. There is still value. And as long as these cards are worth anything at all, there is going to be an incentive to try to do that and to cheat the system. So it's been a long rambling video. If you made it to the end of the video, I do appreciate it. As always, thank you. If you could hit the like button, I'd appreciate that too. If you've got any comments, please do. I'd be happy to talk about anything anything related to this or anything else that you want to talk about in the comments. With that, I will catch you in the next video. Thanks very much, and thanks for watching.